The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about drug use. We're going to be talking about drug use in businesses, mostly in coffee shops. Now, in the town of Woodstock, Ontario, a local coffee shop, a Tim Hortons chain, has decided to take matters into their own hands and stop junkies from going in, not buying any coffee or any type of food, going in, using their bathroom, shooting up and passing out, having complications with drugs, having to call ambulances at least once a week. And we'll get into the article about that. They've decided to take matters in their own hands by putting in blue lights in the bathroom. And what does the blue light do? Well, the blue light helps with veins. Under blue light, it's very difficult to find your veins. Now, in this particular article that we're going to dive into, and the article was done by the CBC, what we call here on the show the Communist Broadcasting Corporation, or the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. This is the state media. This is the same as the Sputnik newspapers of Soviet Russia. This is no different than any of the news agencies that come out of China or North Korea that are run by the government, paid for by the government, and endorse government-backed policies. So we'll get into this particular article from the CBC. But before we do, make sure you go back to our past episodes where we've talked in great detail about the CBC, about all the funding that they've received, their drug addict president of Unifor, Jerry Diaz, has taken time away in the midst of a scandal to deal with personal drug issues. So it's quite fitting that the CBC decides to put this out. But go back to droidscanada.com/Hollis Show, and you can take a look at all those past episodes. Now, the article is dated October 18th, 2022, and it's titled, "Is Installing Blue Lights the Answer to Deterring Drug Use in Public Bathrooms?" by Rebecca Zandbergen. Harm reduction advocacy say the move by Tim Hortons in Woodstock, Ontario is problematic. The owner-operator of a Tim Hortons in Woodstock, Ontario says installing blue lights in its washrooms has decreased the number of drug overdoses in the coffee shop. Some businesses have installed blue lights in their public washrooms in an effort to curb intravenous drug use there. Working on the concept, the lights reduce vein visibility. But some harm reduction advocates worry the approach is pushing intravenous users into more dangerous spaces. Just like so many other businesses, we have had an issue with homeless people coming into our washrooms and doing drugs and shooting up, said Leslie Farrell, the owner of the Tim Hortons on Norwich Avenue. We would probably call the police at least once a day, sometimes more. Woodstock does not have a safe injection site. Quote, "My biggest fear was that a young child would go into the washroom and find somebody had overdosed on the floor." Farrell installed the lights into the store's 2 washrooms about a year ago. We have not had to call for anybody who overdosed in our washroom since we put the blue lights on. We still have to do a little bit of the problem, or still have a little bit of the problem, but definitely has curbed it tremendously, he said. When her customers ask why the bathrooms are lit so strangely, she said, "I think they're happy because we're trying to be a little proactive with the situation." Now, I'm just noticing a little bit of a problem with this particular writing, flipping between he's and she's, and we don't know if Leslie is a he or a she at this point because you're using he's and she's willy-nilly. Harm reduction advocates worry about approach. Just because overdoses are no longer happening in Tim Hortons bathrooms doesn't mean they're not happening, said longtime harm reduction advocate Dr. Andrea Sarita of the London Intercommunity Healthcare in southwestern Ontario. We know from research that drug users only travel a maximum of 500 meters from point of drug purchase to location to use, she said. Therefore, these injections are still happening in the immediate area surrounding the Tim Hortons. I do actually understand why businesses don't want injections on their premises. Liability, impact on other customers, fear within their employees when it happens, Sharita said. However, blue lights don't stop harm of injection drug use. So it's like any old story when someone starts saying, I really like what you're wearing, but, and they throw that but in there. It's the same thing. It's the same statement that this doctor, and we'll get more into her a little bit later, that this doctor uses, that she really understands the impact of liability and the impact on other customers and the fear of the employees, but the lights don't do anything, so you shouldn't be doing it. Blue lights only move the injections into less safe spaces, probably resulting in more death and perhaps more sexual activities because that's what drug dealers and drug users happen to do. Plus, it's unlikely the blue lights would prevent all people from injecting drugs, she said. According to a 2013 study published in the Harm Reduction Journal, blue lights are unlikely to deter injection drug use in public washrooms and may increase drug use-related harms. When someone injects drugs into the surrounding tissue instead of a vein, the person is at a higher risk of infection, said Sharita. Really, what she's saying is, well, that's pretty bad for the business. It wants to kill these, drug addicts because drug addicts' lives matter. Now, there's a picture of this doctor looking stern, with her hands clenched, with her sleeve tattoos, and her hair pulled back, and her glasses, and her laptop opening, with all these stickers of these wonderful, noble, woke, social justice warrior issues. But she goes on to say that safer bathroom toolkits. This fall, a collaborative research team from the Canadian Institute of Substance Use Research, involving the University of Victoria, Coastal Health, the University of British Columbia, and BC Centre on Substance Use, released a safer bathroom toolkit. It includes a sign. So their idea to stop drug use and to get people to stop doing drugs is to put a sign up. And the sign says bathrooms at, and they're open, and it's a really nice sign, and it's a hand up in the corner in the top right, where hands are crossed holding a little heart, and it says safer bathrooms, and it says we do bathroom safety checks every blank minute. We need a verbal response from you. If no verbal response, staff will knock and enter the bathroom to check on you. There is a blank minute limit to use the bathroom. Talk with staff if you need more time. Please only use toilet paper in the toilet. Discard used sharps in sharp container. Talk to the staff. And the closest public washroom is blank, and the closest overdose prevention site is blank. So now what the sign is essentially saying is if I want to go in and take a massive dump because I've eaten at a local restaurant, I'll give them a little bit of a plug. We'll say Fat Louie's in St. Catharines, wonderful pizza. If you ever have the chance to go to St. Catharines, Ontario, I highly recommend going to Fat Louie's. Fat Louie's is a wonderful, wonderful cheese pizza, and their pepperoni, those pepperonis. And the grease, I don't know if that grease is an extra topping, if they charge you for the topping, but if you're ever having issues and the normal laxative is not working, then Fat Louie's is the way to go. So Fat Louie's is going to have this sign up, and they're going to say, there's a minimum of 10 minutes in this bathroom. And I'm going to say, well, hold on there, Fat Louie. I've eaten 5 slices. I'm not going to make the drive home. It's going to be a disaster. I'm going to need it a little bit more time. Probably going to be a 23-minute poop here. So Society is supposed to now say, hey, listen, no, I'm going to stink up your bathroom for a long time because we don't want to hurt drug users' feelings, drug addicts, scum of the earth, the ones that will rob and steal from you, that ride around towns, and the homeless people with bicycles, stealing and thieving in the middle of the night, going into backyards, taking everything that they can, and selling it for whatever drug that they want. It was a great idea from the doctor. Again, we're going to get into a little bit of the doctor here. Bathrooms can provide private, seemingly safe spaces for people to use substances, especially when they are unable to access supervised consumption or overdose prevention sites, the news release reads. But using drugs alone in public bathroom isn't safe, says the research. According to the team, restricting access to bathrooms or implementing measures to discourage substance use isn't the answer either. Doing so increases risk for people to use or who use substances, staff and other people at risk of injury due to unsafe bathroom lighting, layout, and so forth, the release said. There are ways of making bathrooms safer for people who use substances. The toolkit includes bathroom checklists for businesses and other organizations that considers the layout of the facility, staff safety, training, and spot checks. For now, Farnell is keeping the blue lights on. We're just like every other community right now, she said. We're struggling with our homeless population, and with the homelessness comes addiction as well. Everybody in our community, whether it's the United Way or the police board, we're all trying to work together to come to some solution. I don't have the magic answer. I just know that we do have a community that cares, and everybody is trying to come to some sort of solution. So it's not unreasonable to say we don't want to see drug addicts in our stores. We don't have to call. But going back to the Dear Doctor is going to tell people in a small rural town how to deal with drug use. Because if we're going to look at the average income of a household in Woodstock, Ontario, $68,213. That's for a total family. A family, $68,213 annual income. Now we're going to talk to the have a look at the Dear Doctor here. And the Dear Doctor is making $294,312, who does not live in Woodstock, does not live in the particular community, will have no contact when the Dear Doctor is going to whatever fancy coffee shop on the outskirts of town, or perhaps even just in the building themselves and to pick up their own Starbucks, but making $294,312 because only in 2016 the Dear Doctor was only making $148,921 and has seen an increase over that from 2016 to 2017, an almost 50% raise. And in 2020, a 30% raise. This doctor has increased her salary more than an entire street of houses in Woodstock. A community that she will never go to, that is beneath her in all sorts of levels. And she will never go into this Tim Hortons, is going to tell Tim Hortons and going to tell the community around her to say, listen, you have to deal with the drug. You have to deal with the people that are shooting up, and you have to deal with the needles on the ground, and you have to deal with all this. This is your problem. Keep it out of my side. Keep it out of my area, because we don't tolerate those type of people where I live. So it's going to be your problem, and we'll make it an issue so more drug addicts can go to that place to get more help. Because the solution will be, let's put a safe injection site into Woodstock so it will keep the affluent areas drug-free. Because these are the people that run the country. The people that are wealthy, and the people that are only looking out for themselves and care little for the poor drug addict. Because all they want is more drug addicts. The more drug addicts that there are, the more that they can justify a 43.9% raise and another 30.9% raise. 1 year only a 7.1% raise. That's That's really sad, and unfortunately another year with 3.9%, which is still higher than any private sector job. Most people in the private sector would love a 3.9% raise, but these doctors do like their 43.9% raises. So again, as long as there's junkies, as long as there's people shooting up, they can justify to have these elaborate wages, and the cycle continues. If you really want to stop drug use, there's better solutions and there's better ways to deal with it. If you know that the drug is bad for you, then why are you letting people put that drug in them? If you're advocating to say these people need a safe place to have their drugs, where you know that the longer that you use drugs, the worse it impacts you and your mind, why are you, as a doctor, advocating for people to do more drugs, when the solution is they need to stop the drug immediately and get off the drug? As always, feel free to reach out to us on our Facebook page, on our Twitter. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to tune in this week. We hope you have yourself a great week. And thank you again for listening to The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant.
Dun, 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 dun. Salsa shark! We're gonna need a bigger boat!
Throughout history, they have been a part of our Canadian life. Men and women who have made their mission to entertain their fellow man. They've worked hard enough. Isn't it time they had their own podcast?
Right, it's Canada. This podcast would be great if it wasn't for the internet trolls.
I don't bother them, and they don't bother me.
I could do without the bad reviews in the iTunes store.
You have that podcast with that guy who was at that Comic-Con in the last year.
You should hear the barrage of the stupid questions I get on our SoundCloud account.
What do you mean there was coughing? How am I going to hear a podcast with coughing?
You feel a lot better if you just rip into the occasional guest.
You're a host who doesn't get paid. You can't just do anything you want while you're recording.
What kind of podcast are you running here anyways?
Droids Canada Podcast present.
You think anyone can see us down here?
Why, you think you want to have sex or something?
Can we?
Droids Canada Podcast. The only show to rip off a Clerks trailer.
You hate people!
But I love Comic-Cons. Isn't it ironic?